Good evening, good evening, good evening. Buy Black for Life. Good evening. Welcome. Today is Wednesday, and you know what it is that we do. It is Wellness Wednesday. We are continuing our conversations as we recognize that this month, which is National Mental Health Awareness Month. And boy, do we have an amazing panel with us this evening. Welcome. Come on in. If you are watching on replay, we ask that you do hashtag replay and wherever you are watching from. So, welcome. My name is Jerome Hurt, founder of Buy Black for Life. Welcome to another of our Wellness Wednesday. And this evening, we're going to do something different. Normally, I am the one that is reading the bios, but we already know who Dr. Jackie is, who she means to this group. So, Dr. Jackie has volunteered to pick up from me as my technology is off today to read everyone's bio. So, Dr. Jackie, please, you could get us started off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me again. Again, I'm home. This is my home away from home. And so I want to start by introducing our panelists who I am in love with. They're also part of Casa de la Paz Ministries, the prayer group, daily prayer group. So you might have heard of us. We've been praying for 427 days today, aside from other ministries that comprise this beautiful unity. So I want to start with Yuko Kudo. Yuko Kudo is a native Japanese multi-dimensional artist based in New York. She uses art and storytelling to create community while reminding people they are not alone. Through her work as a photographer, she has appeared in Forbes and Time magazines, among other media outlets. Yuko was the finalist for the Rogers Stuyvesant Musical Theater Award for the Actors Equity Association. Her latest work includes one human musical show entitled I Came Here, to Be Loved, focused on identity and labels, premiered as a virtual hybrid theater experience in February 2021. She facilitates the creation of collaboration educational spaces focused on the intersection of art and activism. Executive producer of a documentary series, Untapped Storytellers, an official selection of arts, SDGs. Sorry, you will clarify that festival. She is a board of secretary for Premier Produce Apprentice Cooperative and a member of the Artistic Council for People's Theater Project. Welcome, Yuko. And I'm going to proceed with Alex uh, Titus Cummings. Alex, affectionately known as Alexandra, affectionately known as Alex, you see, I always call you Alex, is a Bronx raised and Florida based intuitive entrepreneur, energy healer, mental health crusader. She has 200 hours in yoga, trauma informed educator, speaker, former podcast co-host of Me Too Radio Zone, a mental health podcast, and a facilitator for nonprofit organizations providing social, emotional, and mindfulness education in New York City public schools and Florida. Uh, a student of yoga since the age of 21, you don't look past 22. Alex began consistently practicing yoga in 2014 to alleviate her experience of depression and anxiety. Alex founded Refined Inner Being, LLC, in 2019, a mental health wellness plus healing sanctuary that uses the modalities of the spiritual healing arts such as yoga, meditation, mindfulness, affirmations, breath work, and Reiki as an alternative form of therapy. In January 2020, Alex resumed her studies to becoming a somatic therapist. Alex has faith in this mind body methodology, which is body centered and revolutionary for intergenerational trauma healing. She states, I stand in my purpose as a mental health crusader to create sanctuaries for individuals and communities to embody a spirit of peace, purpose and personal power through the intention of choosing inner healing.
Amen.
And
Love that.
now I am going to introduce Zulay Martinez. Uh, Zulay Martinez is the assistant principal of Schuylerville Preparatory High School. She was born and raised here in New York City. She holds a bachelor's degree in English literature from Hunter College, a master's degree of English education from Lehman College, with a bilingual extension in Spanish, and a master's degree in administration from Hunter College. She is the daughter of Dominican immigrants and holds a deep passion for giving back to her community. She has been an educator in the city of New York since 2005. Okay.
Welcome. Thank you, Dr. Jackie.
No, okay.
Welcome to one and all. And I'm just going to start with an icebreaker. And Dr. Jackie, I'm going to let you start with answering this one. When you are when you are at that point where you feel a little off, what is it that Dr. Jackie does to, and it could be stress related, it could be challenges with your mental mindset, whatever it may be. What is it that Dr. Jackie does to get yourself back to who you need to be, or who you are?
Well, I prayer first and foremost, right? Prayer, definitely gospel music, God-centered, fearing woman, understanding that my strength lies in the Lord, right? And that I get my strength from the Holy Spirit. And what's beautiful is that these beautiful ladies are part of that as well. So whenever I'm feeling right, what's amazing is that I'll get a text from any of these beautiful ladies or anyone in the group, and it's like, wow, God, how did you know? Right? How did you know? And so to be able to build my world with individuals who genuinely care for me and authentically see the vision that I have for the world and are willing to support me in it is what keeps me grounded. Another thing I would say is allow myself some grace. My grace name is self-care. It could be a nap. It can be taking a walk. It can be turning off all devices because I want to shut down the world and I just want to be with myself.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Salai, I'll ask you the same question. What do you do?
I'm really happy to say that I have a wonderful and supportive community around me, friends, family. So I definitely am one to reach out to others, so that it's sometimes when your mind is a jumble and your stress is high and feelings are all over the place, you just need to get it out, put it out into the world so that it's not quite living within you to that extent. And then the other thing is that I am, as an English major, one of the reasons I became an English major is because I do enjoy to write. So, I have poetry and things that I write, not necessarily anything. Sometimes it's not about sharing it. It's not necessarily for others. It's literally just kind of trying to find a creative outlet to let out your emotions.
Right.
Because again, I think for me personally, I tend to internalize a lot. And so sometimes simply getting it out is
Right.
just the thing that I need so that I can just continue to the next moment.
Thank you. Yuko, how about you?
I'm glad that Delai said you internalize, so that I try to come up with something that's nicer, but I also do internalize a lot. I'm working on reaching out to people. And the Pastor Jackie has been one of the main person that I reach out to. So I'm grateful for the community, and I turn to music. I usually when I feel drained or when I feel low in energy, I need to sleep. So I'll take a nap or I will give myself some more time to sleep. But usually sleep is a very big key factor. And like play piano or listen to music or go for a walk and just surround myself with the nature. Those are very important for me.
Awesome. Alex, how about you?
I am a nature lover, and so that's my sanctuary, that's my church. And so that's where I go, like, grounded and seek God. there's something about nature that invigorates your spirit when you're feeling low. So for myself, and my experience with depression, anxiety, since the age of 16, for me, like stepping out and like taking my shoes off, if it's a nice warm day, planting my feet on the grass for some grounding, like within, guys, I tell you not, like in 5 minutes, you will feel invigorated. You'll start to feel your spirit lifting up. So if you're exhausted, you're going to get, a little energy. If you're feeling sad, you're gonna probably feel hope.
Yes.
My experience, that's what I experience when I go out in nature to get my mind right. And then, usually I like to do this by myself, because I am an introvert. So I like to do a lot of stuff on my own. But then, I have my core support and they like to tag along with me, and that's always nice. Um, and like my favorite place in nature is a body of water. So definitely hitting up the beach. I live like 2 minutes away from the beach. So I'm like really blessed to just go there when I need to,
Yes.
and just allow the sun to hit me.
Yeah.
It's We underestimate the power of nature and how nature is like really the number one medicine for us to get well.
I do believe in nature, actually, the healing properties of Mother Nature, the water. Um, but Zle, you said something that I want to touch on, and that's a community, right? You talked about, Dr. Jackie also talked about it. A community. How important is it to surround yourself with a community when you are, struggling, that can um, help you through? How important is that?
I think it's one of the just most important things that you can do. I mean, just, you know, studies, psychological studies have shown that human beings are social by nature. We come together and we form societies, and there is not a community, right, that exists. There's not a people that exists. And even when we have individuals, like Alex, who says, right, she's an introvert and she's perfectly fine doing things on her own. But Alex still probably has the person or people that she connects with, right?
Right.
And so, I think if if people didn't realize it before, this pandemic has probably really opened people's eyes to it.
Yeah.
Today I had a senior day with my students that I planned, for all my seniors. And it was the first time that they had been together in probably about a year and a half, since the pandemic started. For some of them, they hadn't seen each other at all. And just the joy that they experienced in being in that same space was amazing. It was unbelievable. And, I think that that's one of the things that is, I think that's one of the things that's the saddest about when you are suffering from certain kinds of mental health issues, right? Like depression, is that feeling of loneliness, of being the only one. And unless you have a community, you sometimes don't realize that you're not, right? That's not actual perception.
Right.
That's not what it actually is, I should say. Rather, it is, perception.
Yeah.
So I think community is probably one of the most important things. I think finding your tribe is something that everyone should do, because it really just is a part of human nature. Just for the sake of your own humanity, you should.
Right. Yuko, same question. How about you? About how important a community is for mental health healing, actually.
Absolutely. It's very, very crucial. And I echo on everything Zalai said. Um, it's different, right? Like this time of pandemic, I'm an introvert, and prior to the pandemic, a lot of the things that I already do, I'm already doing it either at my home, or so I had to actively seek out for the the people to connect with. And also there's a clear distinction. There is a one thing to be a part of community and surrounded by folks versus actually be in relationship with community. There's a clear distinction there. And like you can be surrounded by 100 people and still feel lonely, right?
So true. Yeah.
So the community can be your roommates, community can be your family, community can be your neighbor. It doesn't have to be a huge group of people, just one person. That if you can build a relationship, that is a community that we can rely on. So I would probably choose the word relationship, intimate relationship with the people, with the God, and that is more important in my personal life. And if that is categorized as a community, absolutely.
And you know, Dr. Jackie, you know, just piggybacking off of what Yuko said, you and what it is that you do with your prayer group, right? You create a community, not just a community, but a diverse community that is not just diverse but also inclusive. How do you foster that community? And it's a community of healing as well, because I know what you do and how you do, but you foster a community, a diverse and inclusive community. How do you nurture that?
You know, it's funny you should say that, because just today I posted that I can't live my life purpose without the people around me. And so is one is understanding as a human being that I can't do anything alone. I was made to be in relationship. Um, but to be able to withstand the principles that we live by, the principles that the daily prayer group stands on,
Yeah.
is to come as you are. We're not to judge. God is the only judge.
Amen.
And we'll love you regardless of what, right? In the prayer line, we've laughed, we've cried, people, we have Latanya, who was here before. She came from North Carolina, visit with a few of us. It's really the relationship that we're genuine to one another. I don't think that there's a time that anyone in this particular group has said, I need your support, and someone has said no. Right. And it's being honest with each other, and making sure for me as a pastor that I'm careful with my nose.
Mm.
I'm very careful with my nose. I'm a type of woman, I can be, very stubborn. I'm going to do this, I'm going to take care of it. But I also understand that other people's blessing is to bless others. And
Yes.
so when I say no, I'm actually blocking a blessing. Right? Especially if someone is telling me from their heart, I'm here to help you. Right? So to be sensitive to that, and I can't require people to do that if I don't do that myself.
Right.
Right? I've cried many times,
Same
laughed,
here.
joked.
Yeah.
This the core community knows who I am.
Love
Right?
it.
They've seen some of my meltdowns. Listen, it's real. You've witnessed some of them while I'm trying to do a Zoom, right? And I'm doing it correctly, right? And I'm like, well, but you don't understand. She's like, I do,
Yeah.
right? Is being able to be yourself. You can't come as you are if you feel you have to. Now, if you have to put on a mask,
Yeah.
if I have to put on a mask, then I can't come as I am,
I'm
right?
not showing up.
At all. It's a facade.
Yes.
It's a facade, and it's what has been out there, and unfortunately is what has hurt many churches, many ministries. Young people don't want to go to church because they're hurt, and that plays into their mental health. They don't want me, they judge me, they don't like me, I have to level up, I have to look like them, I have to, and all of that. It's unfortunately that we prayed for a young man who was 12 years old, who felt the need to run away from home, not just run away, but attempt suicide.
Well,
Right. And this is the conversations that we deal with. These are the people that we stand in the gap for. Like, we're clear that when you say pray for me, trust I'm praying for you.
I already know.
Right? Because that's our calling. That's who we are. We're prayer warriors and intercessors.
Yes.
Right? We're not just gonna like la 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 our Father. No, we're going to war. There's principalities that we get to war against. And it's not something that we take lightly.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Alex, I see so many things that you do surrounding mental health. And God bless you. So, how do you serve your community with healing your community with the many skills and tools that you have? How do you serve your community with that?
Um, well, first and foremost, I always need to serve. I have to be honest with myself and my current situation. Um, and I'm a big believer in like having the capacity to hold space and create space and service. Um, and also know, like, in order to overcome depression or anxiety, that one of the things that help you forward is being of service to other people when you're going through your own um, crisis per se. Um, and how I serve my community, it's very simple. Like I said, I'm an intuitive, so um, I believe that everyone else is as well, and so I like to lead from a space of curiosity and what works best. Like I never pressure anyone to say or do anything unless they feel that they're moved to it. And so, how I began doing the work was back in 2015, um, when I decided like to really take control over my well-being, because my life was becoming really unmanageable with my emotions, mental health, and my depression. Like I was just pretending that I was okay, but I wasn't. And I just noticed that like I was going through a lot of like breakdowns in my relationships with people, my finances, like career, everything. And so I started, you know, taking personal development courses that we all actually have taken, part of a community called Momentum Education. And that that those workshops called me forward to really like step into a new narrative of my life. Like only because I'm experiencing depression and anxiety doesn't control the narrative of my life and where I want to be. You know, I'm not depressed. I'm not anxiety. I just have experience of it.
Right.
Think that for me, how I serve my community is really from a space of affirmative, like affirmative, like conversations and writing. Like, you know, don't don't claim that you have depression and anxiety. Yes, that may be your diagnosis, but don't claim it as your forever and the reason why you're not where you want to be. You know what I mean? And so, um, I decided to start to share my journey with healing. Like, okay, what does healing look like? What does mental wellness look like for me? What does that look like? And so what I did was I started going back to therapy. Therapy was another thing that I was like in conflict with. So I would go when I felt like it. And, you know, it was just I wasn't consistent, right?
Right.
So I started going back to therapy. I started, you know, tapping into other healing modalities that will help me self-regulate my emotions and what I was experiencing. And all of those modalities just drew me closer to God.
Mm.
And remembering, like, okay, I know that um, all of these things that I've experienced, and the things that I even understand how I made it through wasn't just me doing the work. It's like it's God, it's a higher power. Like this
Yes.
is not me. How can I share my experiences and serve people so that they hope? Because you know when you're going through crisis with your mental health, there's no hope. Like what light at the end of the tunnel? You don't see
Right.
light.
You don't see it.
You don't feel hope. You don't feel supported, understood, but it's really the battle that you're experiencing internally because you're not sure what's going on, especially if you're not self-aware. And so when I started taking my steps into self-awareness and like really getting clear, like okay, this is what I'm experiencing, and I started tapping into mindfulness and Reiki and all those things, I started taking control of how I can navigate my life. right? And restore and also like renew, because all of these things that I was experiencing it was also a trauma response. And so I started documenting my experiences and my journey, and I started sharing it with a leadership team that I was a part of in mental education. And when I started sharing my journey around depression, I felt a release, because I never share that with anyone. Like,
Right.
even growing up, my family didn't even know what to do with me, because they didn't have the resources or the education to know what is mental health.
Right.
You know, I come from a Afro-Caribbean background. My mom's from Cuba, and we don't talk about those things, let alone even cry at home.
Right.
You're emotional. Like,
Right.
those things were not accessible to me. And so when I was able to share with my community, you know, during my leadership journey, hey, this is what I'm going through. I felt a release. I felt supported. And what was so ironic is that I wasn't alone, because like 5 people came up to me and said, well, how do you like be so joyful? Because I'm going through the same thing you're going through and I don't see a way out. So
Right.
how do you talk about it and then find joy? And I said, well, joy is my birthright. That's who I am. You know
I
what I mean?
love that.
I've been joyful since a kid. And so that's always going to be my context of what I create, and what I want to experience, and what I want other people to experience when they experience me. Right. And so, I started documenting my journey. Like I said, I started sharing it on social media, something that I would have never done in a million years. But I said to myself, no one's having this conversation. This is 2015, guys, when the
Wow.
conversation was still like dipping your toes in the water, right?
Right.
Talking about mental health, but not really, right? I don't know if you guys remember 2015, but I remember people were not as bold as they are now.
Absolutely not.
And so I started sharing on social media, and I started with this hashtag called Dear Mental Health Crusader. And Dear Mental Health Crusader is like an open letter to myself. And I know that if I'm writing it to myself, there is someone out there that can actually identify with what I'm writing. And then I would sign it off as myself. And I started noticing people were engaging. And they were like, you know, I get what you're saying. I felt like you were speaking to me. And, you know, I started noticing that people were trying to figure out how to communicate what they were experiencing in regards to mental health. And so I say, you know what, I'm going to continue this, because I know this is my purpose. You know, how do I make this make sense? And I just kept doing it. I kept posting about it.
Love it.
And then I started like creating my own opportunities, and people also started like contacting me to like speak at their schools, at their like women brunches and all these things. And I was just like, okay. And at the time, like I was so like reluctant, because I wasn't a mental health professional. Like, I'm a mental health professional in training now, but back
Right.
then I wasn't. And so I said, well, they're like, are you an advocate? And I said, no, I'm a mental health crusader. I'm like, I'm on a quest here. I'm on a quest to get well. And I'm on a quest to bring people with me on the journey, so that they can know how they can get well, not just only with talk therapy, but with other modalities. And so I just kept it going. And I noticed that it was supporting other people that I didn't even
Yes.
know. And that's how I started serving. And then I said, okay, well, let me take this really serious, because it is. Let me go back to schools. Let me get these certifications, get these trainings, and like start sharing what I do for myself, but in a bigger way. Let me teach people how
Right.
to heal their mental wellness, how to manage, right? My goal is always for someone to go seek therapy first, right? Although I say talk therapy is not enough, because it's not.
It's not.
It's for me, I always think it's step one. Um, but I say, you know what? If that one person, if it's a room full of 20 people and one person says, I'm making an appointment to see a therapist next week, that right there is
Job done.
range supreme. Like that's always like a goal for
Yeah.
me. But you know, people they discover other things. Maybe it's not talk therapy. Maybe it's self forgiveness or forgiving others. Um, maybe is changing their diet, you know, and maybe is moving out of their state. Maybe your environment is not allowing you to thrive mentally, you know. So there's a lot of different things. And so I said to myself, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to teach people. I'm going to continue to share what I'm experiencing. And I have to let go of what people think about what I'm sharing, because I know there's more than one person that can identify.
Amen.
I leave this out, I am doing a disservice to myself and to someone else that can use the help.
Amen.
And so, yeah, so that's really it. Just teaching people how to access other things in addition to talk therapy, like mindfulness and just like self-regulation, like taking their power back. Like, okay, right now I may not have control of this. Right now I don't know what's going on. Right now I see no hope. But I know that if I take the first step into therapy, or maybe start practicing yoga, maybe I get to open up my Bible, you know, whatever that is for that individual, that's the first step. And that's what I thrive for. You know, it's always for them to like cultivate peace, purpose, and personal power. Because I think those three things are like the pillar of like finding yourself grounded. Because everybody wants a peace of mind. Everyone's always saying, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? Right? And not knowing that when you wake up and you open your eyes, that's purpose right there. And then personal power, what is that exactly? You know, your personal power is you. It's you saying, you know what? Yes, I'm going to take care of myself. And I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to ask someone. Or I'm going to go on Google and research. Or I'm going to, whatever that thing is. But those three pillars are very important.
So what you're touching on is so vitally important, because I always hear people say hurt people, but no one is saying heal people. So you're healing, and you're healing people along with you. But I want to also ask that same question of Yuko, but I want to add something to it, because it's so vital. You touched upon it, Alex, in just a little bit, but the cultural norms that each of us come to with respect to mental health is huge, right? And it's something that I know in the Black community, we sweep it under the rug until we're falling over it, right? So Yuko, touch upon, first of all, your vast skills. I know you're a photographer, you're an actress as well, but how that plays into the healing of your community, but also how the cultural norms plays into mental health healing and awareness.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking the question. That's a very important question. And Asian culture, I'm Japanese native, and it's very similar, like a stigmatized relationship with mental wellness, right? So I never talk about what I talk to people with my parents, or at least not before, right? And I would internalize everything. Let me take care of this everything by myself. Let me write on this journal. So what I'm processing right now is being able to play piano, being able to have something to access on the stage, to play. Those are allowed me to process the emotion that I wasn't able to do in my personal life. So those are the tools for me to process and being able to communicate things that I wasn't able to. And now that I am adult and I have a little bit more self-aware in practice now, as a storyteller, I have to do more process before I take it on the stage, before I put that out on the stage. Like Alex was saying, I have to share my story as a vessel so that people can relate to that. And I think right now it's a very hard time for artists, because we are hit real hard. We were shut down from the COVID, the first to go out and the last to come back. We're barely coming back. So a lot of folks are still struggling to find how to adjust in that space, how to come back into in-person experience. And it's so evident that lack of infrastructure that has been there for art and culture sector, art and entertainment industry, have harmed artists in general for so long.
Wow.
So it's very important because I hear it all the time, and I was one of them. I had to go to my day job so that I can pay my rent. And people could not afford like a therapy session, right? And so we run and we escape to art so that we can process, we feel the purpose. And getting applause was our self-validation. Getting the role was our self-acceptance.
Wow.
So from that to really channel that to know I'm telling this story because I want to, because I have something to share. That's a huge distinction. And I am barely starting this journey. And art is such a great tool, as we've already discussed before. And a lot of people through this pandemic has been, they listen to music, they watch so many movies and TV shows, they read books. So it is evident that art, it creates healing, art creates connection, art offers empathy. And it is so important for me to realize that we're all artists, hence we get to all connect with each other. So that's why we get to talk and relate to each other, right? So adding up to your hurt people, heal people, we understand the connection. Our personal experience becomes the universal experience.
Yes.
That's why I love art so much, and that's why I keep sharing my art. And I have to heal myself first in order for me to share this story. So
I love that. It's a lot. It's a lot. I noticed that when I talked about cultural, your hand went up. So please share. Don't hold back. Please share.
Yeah, I, my own experience, having been diagnosed with depression, I started therapy in maybe 2010, 2011. And, I remember, first of all, there was just this unbelievable fear in my gut, just to admit to myself that I needed it.
Yeah.
That alone was just like, it took everything within me to reach that point. And then, when I started going to therapy, then having to tell people like in my family that I was going to therapy was another, just again, right, like Alex was talking about, you don't talk about it, right? You didn't talk about it. You just, it's not something that within the community we visited, right? Like it was just unheard of. And only there, to go to a therapist, like I remember, my mother is the most beautiful soul. She is loving. She is wonderful. She is the mother that other people call mom. Like people who aren't her children call her mom.
Right.
But I remember when I said to my mother, "So Ma, I'm seeing a therapist." Her response was, "No me diga que tú estás loca ahora." Literally meant like, "Don't tell me you're crazy now. Like, don't tell me you're going nuts. Oh no, like I can't handle it." And it was literally like, I had to explain to her, no, it's not that I'm nuts. I'm not nuts. I'm not going crazy. It's, I'm not, it's not schizophrenia. It's not bipolar. I need someone to talk to, and it's not enough,
right.
To just reach out to a friend. Like what I'm feeling and what I'm going through, I can't explain it anymore. Because, especially when you're suffering from, certain kinds of depression. Depression is one of those words that have been co-opted into the English language to just mean sad.
Yep.
I'm so depressed, right? Everyone uses that. I'm depressed, like my cat died, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
I lost $10, I'm depressed. But actual depression, right? When you're suffering from something that's diagnosed, it has no origin.
It hurts.
There is no, this happened to me and now I feel this thing, right? Or maybe something did happen to you, but it happened so long ago that it's hard to explain why this experience at the age of 6 is affecting me at the age of 36. And so you sort of realize that you do reach a point where you have to go outside of yourself. You do have to find someone to talk to. And one of, I was talking earlier about the importance of finding community. And that's one of those things. It's like, when your community does not understand you, when the people who you have chosen cannot see what's going on and don't know how to help you and don't, it really compounds what's already a terrible thing, a terrible experience. And also, I think that sometimes, when we think of our traumas, the things that have traumatized us, right? Sometimes it is easier to tell a stranger than to tell someone who loves you or who you love, especially if there's a potential that is the person who caused it.
Absolutely, yes.
Right? Like when you have to say to that person, listen, I got to go see this other person over here because of you. Like, I mean, sometimes you need help having that conversation. And when it's, when I think to myself about some of the traumas I experienced, to have to tell my mom or my dad, how they would take it upon themselves to think I wasn't, what do you mean that happened to you?
Yeah.
How could that have happened to you? You're my child. How could I not have protected you in that moment? I mean, forget it, right? That opens up a whole other can of worms. And so, that third person, right? Like Alex said, like, I really do. I also, believe that sometimes that's just that first step, finding that third person, that person who doesn't know you, who doesn't know your backstory, who listens. Sometimes my therapist would do something as simple as repeat to me the words I just said.
So the hearing it back helps for me. Hearing it back and being like, oh, wow, I said that. Yes. Yes.
You don't even realize the things that come out of your mouth. Like the times that you speak with such finality or such completeness, as if, the world is going to end and there is no alternative, right? How many times you say, the only thing, and it's like, the only thing, and you're like, oh, well, I guess not the only thing, right? And then suddenly you start realizing exactly what it is that you're saying.
Yeah.
And again, that's the kind of thing that a trained professional can do, that your friends, because they're just, they want to be there for you. They want to hear you, right? They don't necessarily know to just do that. They're just like, yeah, that's right. That is the only thing.
They put the battery in you. and for me, it was that, well, this is just the way that I am, that I would always have the response for. It's just the way that I am. And how is that serving you? So yes, thank you. Dr. Jackie, I'm going to ask you the same question about the cultural, but one also thing I want to ask you is, what is the role of the church you believe should be the role of the church around healing our communities of the mental challenges? And let me just say, when I think of our communities that I'm talking about, we had issues pre-pandemic. And I believe it only gets bigger. Imagine being that single person, and I had some single friends who were in the house by themselves, couldn't go anywhere, also were struggling financially. So what do you think of the cultural piece in mental wellness, number one, but also number two, what is the role of the church?
That's a good question. So in terms of culture, right? Like we I hear everyone's story, right? Also to take into account that there's so many things that make up a culture, right? Like right now, the prayer line has a culture,
Yes.
right? We've developed the culture of caring, loving, being there, right? And to be able to accept, right? That is absolutely necessary, right? In terms of what Alex was saying about therapy, talk therapy, right? I also think that spiritual is in tandem, right? Because oftentimes what happens is we get stuck on the therapy piece, but then we lose spirituality, right? But then we get stuck on spirituality, and then there's really no reality.
Right.
Right? And then what we're doing is we're trying to emulate the Bible, and we know that the Old Testament was written for a reason, but there's a reason why we have a New Testament.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that both are necessary. As for my opinion of the role the church should play is being authentic is key. Don't use the pulpit to weaponize the word of God.
Say that again, please, for those in the
Don't
back.
use the pulpit to weaponize the word of God.
Yes.
You know, yes, God has, he disciplines us, but he also loves us, right? And to be able to understand that come as you are doesn't mean, oh, look what they're wearing. Right? It doesn't mean I have, I laugh because I have someone who loves when I play usher role, right? Or anything, but like, oh, what? Oh, right? No, it doesn't mean that if you're in an office as in the church, it means that you're higher than. It means listen, let me tell you what it means. It means you get to serve more than anybody else, right? And so to be honest, to be accepting, right? Not to be judgmental, because you know what? I don't want to be judged the same way.
Yes.
Right? The church is meant to be a hospital. See, that's the thing. We don't realize that we're a hospital. We're a hospital for people don't like to hear this word, but for those that are broken, those that their spirit, they feel that they can't anymore. It's supposed to be a place where we can be ourselves and be with one another. What I love about the prayer group is that there is not a problem that someone brings up that somebody within that group doesn't try to solve. Right. And I don't mean like the one that I said, I'm your friend. I mean, oh, you don't have insurance. Let's talk about insurance and how you can get it. Oh, wait a minute. You want to see a therapist, but you're doing it backwards. You're looking for a therapist, but you don't know what your insurance offers.
Yes.
Right. So we're not just there to feed you the word of Christ and to teach you about God and the Holy Spirit. We're also there to be a resource unto you. One of the things that I have to say about this group is Small and Mighty. We have contributed to shelters, not one shelter, but 5 different states.
Amen.
Okay.
Amen.
We have been able to take toys for Christmas to shelters. Right? Like
I need to be a part of that. Yes.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Yes.
Like, these are the things that we do. We're starting a youth ministry because the stories that we hear on the prayer line can't continue. They can't continue. The other thing that I believe the role of the church is to tell their story. I'm not talking about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I'm talking about Zulai, Yuko, Alex, Jackie, and Jerome.
Yes.
Because that's the story that's going to bring the people. Because if we were able to experience the freedom, the healing, and the touch of God, then it's possible for someone else. Sometimes the people in the prayer group get angry with me because I'm like, you need to speak. And they're like, well, we have nothing to say. Yeah, you do. You went through some trials within 24 hours, child. I know you did. Because if you didn't, you must have locked yourself under the bed. And the reason why I do that is for a couple of things. One, your story ministers to someone else.
Absolutely does.
And second, if you're being quiet because you're fearful, I don't want the enemy to have that over you. You don't get to please the enemy. You get to please God, and God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of a sound mind. And so that's my passion. And I believe that the church needs to step up. Not every church has done wrong, right? But unfortunately, the church is comprised of the body, and all churches are part of the body.
Amen.
And so, yeah. So I feel that we need to step up. We need to step up. It's not enough to talk about it anymore.
Right.
We got to be about doing about it. And what are we doing about it?
I love it.
The
Love
question.
it. We're time goes fast, right?
I know, right? It's like, look at the time.
Wow. But there's one important question because and I'm going to be transparent for those of you who don't know me. I am very transparent about my own bout with depression, right? And I'm clear in saying depression hurts. It was dark, and it took me a while for me to climb out of that hole, right? But so many people, I'm blessed with a platform of 172,000 people in 99 countries throughout the world. All praises to God.
Amen.
And I just really believe that we have to normalize, no matter where we're from, who we are, conversations about mental health.
Gotcha.
So, Alex, I'll start with you. How do you feel about the necessity, the importance of normalizing conversations about mental health?
It's obvious. Like there's no more. Like the word stigma should be like crossed out already because it's not a stigma anymore. Like I said, in 2015, we were dipping our toes in the conversation. It's 2021, and now you have people like Charlemagne the God, right? He's everyone knows him as one of the hosts of the Breakfast Club, right, in the radio station. And I'm grateful for people like him because people like him has a platform to talk about mental health. And so because he has a large platform, now people are listening because now everyone's on their phone, everyone's on social media. So sometimes, in my experience, I feel like people tend to listen to celebrities and people in larger platforms around mental health versus someone that may have a nonprofit or is just sharing to share. And so for me, um, it is imperative to share. It's an imperative to have the conversation. I think these conversations are great to have at brunch with your girlfriends and your homeboys. I think these conversations are great to have at the dinner table. You have going to get a pedicure with your homegirl. Like these conversations should be part of a conversation. So if we're going to talk about what came on TV last night, we should be talking about, okay, so how's your mental health this week? Like, what have you gone? How's therapy going? Like, you have to tell me what happened in therapy, but how's therapy going? You know, and it starts with me, right? It starts with the individual. I have these conversations. Sometimes people create boundaries with me. I'm not with that, and I'm like, all right, cool, no problem. I know that I'm gonna keep talking about it, but I'm gonna respect your boundary because I know this may trigger you. You're not ready for that, and I respect and I honor people there because they're not ready, and I just pray that one day they become ready. For me, when I decided to really like normalize this conversation and to really accept what I've been through was in 2018 when I had a breakdown. And when I mean breakdown, I had a breakdown. And I've never in my life experienced anything like this. Um, and this was a time where my life was actually going pretty okay, right? I was in a really interesting space in 2018. But again, there's systems that you learn to put in place as you go with your journey, right? Because one day you can wake up great, and then the next day you can wake up extremely
Right.
low, you know. And so in 2018, like I said, it was going pretty good, and something just snapped, right? I was in transition with career, right? That like wanting to step into or leaving my 9 to 5 job, and I think there was a issue there where something happened, right? And I'm still learning about that experience in 2018 because it continues to follow me, right? And
Absolutely.
not in a bad way. It's just in a new way. Like, oh wow, right? And so in 2018, I was very committed to therapy, and I was doing the work, and I started having a hard time getting up in the morning to go to work, and that's how I know I'm off when I'm just dreading the day, right? And I would speak to my therapist about it, and her feedback was like, you're going through a transition, and sometimes in transition, people become depressed. Um, and she goes, and at that time, I was high functioning depressed, meaning like I was on the go, I was making things happen, but I was pain. I was like extreme. Because depression to me is
Yes,
that's
it
the
is.
only way I could describe it. Anyway, so I started having a hard time with my thoughts. Mind you, I have a meditation and mindfulness practice, and even that wasn't supporting me. Um, and my thoughts, they started to become really dangerous. Like I started thinking about harming myself.
Mm.
And the thing is, in my early 20s, I didn't really know what was going on with me, right? Because I had stopped seeing therapy. Like, I had gave up the whole trying to see therapy thing. I was like, I'm fine, nothing wrong with me. Every time I tell someone in my life what I'm going through, they're telling me that I have no reason to be sad and that I have no reason for anything. I should be happy and grateful, whatever. And so in my early 20s, I was self-medicating a lot with alcohol, with weed. You know, I was living like this crazy lifestyle. And that self-medication was not my experience. So I was never able to actually feel sadness at its core. It was like surface-based sadness. It's not until like I started with therapy again in 2010 where I was like, okay, I'm actually feeling this sadness. This hurts. What is this, right? And so fast forward to 2018, I'm having these dark thoughts. I'm telling my therapist about it. And one day I just woke up and I just planned the day. And I said, okay, today I'm going to walk out moving traffic and get it over with, because I don't like this life I'm living. I don't like myself. I don't understand what's going on. And my therapist and I don't know what's going on. She kept saying, oh, you're in transition. And I'm telling her the day before I created my plan that I'm having these dark thoughts and that I'm thinking of harming myself. And her response was, I'm in a meeting right now. I'll call you back. Right.
Wow.
And that's another conversation for the day around therapy, how to pick up. Right. I'll be happy to talk about that another time. And so at that moment, that experience made me write about not trusting therapists, right? Because I was still on the fence about it. But I went about my day to like execute what I do, and through the grace of God, it wasn't working, right? And I laugh now because it wasn't working. I was so frustrated because I wanted to end, but there was something in me that didn't want to die, right? So sometimes with people, when they do attempt to commit suicide, some of them don't want to die, right? Sometimes it's like a call for help. For me, I wasn't trying to do a call for help because I didn't tell anybody what I was do. I knew exactly what I was doing. But in the back of my head, I said, this ain't right. This is not me. Yeah. You get what I'm saying? But in any given moment, it can be anybody. That's just how it is, you know, unfortunately. And so that attempt wasn't working because every time I try to cross the street, a car would like stop in front of my tracks. Somebody would pull me out. It was like a movie. And I was 3 blocks away from the hospital that I was born in. And I was like, you know what? I got to check in because I'm going to really hurt myself if I don't get out of the street. And I called a friend at the time that was able to identify with my current experience. And I'm grateful because she actually walked me to the hospital on the phone. Like, wow. And the security guard make sure that he and I can speak. And I walked in and I just surrendered at that moment because I knew that I had no control anymore. And that whatever was going on mentally, I needed help, right? It was just not therapy, right? I needed real help. I needed to get to the bottom line of it, right? My diagnosis is still depression, anxiety, but all of the mix of like just trauma from a child, you know, conditioning, all of the things played a part, and it just stuck for like a big pimple in my face. It just didn't want to go.
And you're now able to talk about that and share that. Mm-hmm. That's part of the normalizing that I was talking about.
And the thing was that time I already had created my community, so they were in on this. Like after, you know, I spent 7 days in the hospital, best thing I ever did for myself. I even got on antidepressants for 3 months, you know, because it was something that I was a hard no. Like I was like, no meds for me. I'm not this, but I chose that at that time because I knew there was something that I needed to do to get to the root of what was really going on.
Yeah.
You know, once I was, you know, I took a few months to really get right, and I shared that with my community. And, you know, that's part of normalizing things. People
Right.
think because you're an influencer or you're a therapist or teacher or this or that, that you don't go through things. Like, you go through things, and we don't all have it together. No one has it together. And it's something profound you share with someone, that type of intimacy that you don't probably want nobody to know about,
Right.
but it's something that happens to someone else because of it. You give
Right.
access to freedom when you do let them know, like, this is what I've been through, and I bounced back, and I'm committed to keep on healing, commitment to keep figuring out what I can do to better myself so that I can teach other people. And so after that breakdown, like, things just turned around for me, because I got to dig deeper as to what was really going on, right? And why that experience happened. And the healing really came from being out in nature, but it really came out of being in community. And that's when I learned, like, okay, yes, I'm an introvert, but I know how to be with people. Like, I'm very social when I have to be. But I learned that being in community is what helped me normalize it for myself, and what seems to be normalized within community, to be able to have the conversation.
Got it.
And
Zulai, how about you? How important is it that we normalize conversations like this surrounding mental health?
I mean, I think it's of utmost importance. I think, especially when I think of my own experience, when I think of my students, it's in schools, it's not unusual for us to have students who are, both learning disabled and emotionally disturbed sitting in the same classroom, right? And I think that one of the things that, I think another thing that we're starting to talk more of, and we're starting to really just recognize more, is the role that poverty plays in creating trauma.
Mm.
And when you are, I happen to have my entire career as an educator has been in the Bronx, which is, the poorest borough in the city of New York. And those are my kids. And, sometimes that alone has caused a series of trauma in my students that teachers now have to take into consideration. When I started teaching, words like, social emotional learning didn't exist. That wasn't part of my teacher training.
Right.
And now today, as a matter of fact, Chancellor Porter, Mayor de Blasio, and his wife were talking about the number of new social workers and psychologists and school counselors that are being hired to put into schools because of the recognition of the need for mental health screening amongst our children.
Amen.
And this is, 16 years later, we're finally starting to have these kinds of conversations and realizing that this actually plays a role in trying to educate our children. So I think normalizing this it's one of the most important things. And I think also, just as an educator myself, and when I think to the question that you asked Dr. Jackie about the role that spirituality plays, that the ministry plays in mental health, right? I very much was, I'm a lapsed Catholic. I grew up Catholic school, whole 9 yards. And I thought that I had achieved the level of education to realize, religion is just praying to, fake beings in the sky and all that other stuff. And I had kind of just gotten myself and convinced myself that I was past all of that. I was above it all in my education and my achievement of education. And one of the things that I heard once I started to kind of reconnect with my spirituality and recognize that that was a part of me that I valued, that I had as a child, in the peacefulness of my childhood, and in those peaceful moments that I had lost as an adult. I remember listening to a talk by Neil deGrasse Tyson where he was saying that he's often asked this question about his belief in God and all this other stuff. And he goes, he doesn't think that's an important question. He put up this number, like 93% of scientists, people with doctorate degrees, don't believe in God and religion. He said, but the question is not why don't they? The question is, why does the 7% still believe?
Wow.
they still have the same degrees, right? They're still doctors, they're still scientists, they're still engineers. So what's going on with the 7% over here? When everyone else has been like, I am enlightened and I know so much better.
Right.
So again, right, like I think that all of these conversations of the things that make us human, that make up our experiences, that make up, what we are and who we are, they are valuable and they must be had. And we have to stop shutting each other down and closing each other off. And when I think of the education of my kids, like to me, that is one of the paramount things, because there are times that we cannot educate them. It's not that we don't want to. It's not that the resources aren't there, but they are going through so much that algebra just isn't going to do it.
Right now, it's not what we don't need to get to the lesson plan. I get it. Yeah.
And we have to learn that it's okay to stop that conversation and say, you know what, guys, you're not there. Today, let's talk about how you're feeling. We'll read Macbeth later. Shakespeare isn't going anywhere. He's been around for 600 years.
Right.
He'll be around for 600 more.
Right.
Let's see what's going on with you guys, right? And I think it's wonderful that it's starting to happen. We're not quite at normalization yet, but I think it's one of the most valuable things that can happen. And I genuinely hope that if anyone is listening to me and is in education, that you are taking your social emotional learning, your SEL learning and training as seriously as you did your training in classroom management and lesson planning and curriculum development, because it is that important to genuinely bringing our students ahead. Because the internet has turned us into a global community.
It has.
And yet, in many ways, the screen has made it so that we are connecting with each other even less.
Yes.
And we need to start rebuilding those connections. And these conversations are what does that.
Awesome. Thank you. And I also believe, and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So I'll just go to you. You go, please excuse me. That same question about normalizing these conversations. I know being in the creative arts, I'm sure that might be something that you guys, who are part of that community, you share with one another. But again, how important in the arts community are normalizing these conversations?
It's crucial, right? It's everything, though, because it's what makes us human. The light spot on about the financial. There's well-being and a financial well-being, physical well-being, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, right? Like all of these well-being, the basic human needs have to be met, and we've forgotten to talk and communicate with each other because everything is 140 letters, right? And for me, one thing that I want to point out, because I think the conversation about going to therapy and talking to therapy, it's so important, and being able to have this conversation, it's so important. At the same time, on a personal level, you have to learn to slow down and be patient with ourselves. Because when I'm just going to speak for myself, I have accustomed to internalize myself, try to not to talk about my emotions so much. And once I made my decision to go to a therapist, it took me over a year to actually start talking about the problem, because we are not so accustomed to talking about things. So it takes time. It takes practice to start trusting about yourself, or just to learn the vocabulary that we like, how we are feeling. Sometimes we can't even distinguish what I'm feeling, because I don't know if I'm mad or if I am upset about something. I can't distinguish what I'm feeling. So we have to start that fundamental. And so I often like to use what I'm feeling versus how I'm feeling, because when I say how I'm feeling, it's good or bad and become judgmental. And what I'm feeling in my body, is it the pain that I'm feeling, tension that I'm feeling, ease that I'm feeling. So I get to give myself an opportunity to be compassionate a little bit more. And it is a practice. It is a practice to stop. It is practice to talk to people. It is a practice to listen to people. And as an artist, and as an as a human, like, I hate the word toxic positivity, because we're supposed to show up perfect. We're supposed to smiling all the time. How are you doing? I'm great. I'm grateful. But when you are in that space, it is okay to have that moment of, I'm not feeling well.
Yes.
I am feeling really lonely. I am feeling discouraged. So, like, it takes time to understand ourselves. It takes time to communicate that. It takes time to really trusting people and start doing the internal work, because it's ugly and messy. And Lord have mercy, how many times I try to run away from so many issues.
I
So,
get it. I get it. So
yeah.
thank you. And Zelida, you know, the thing that I remembered is, especially during the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, there were things that were happening in this world, and all of us, especially our young people, had to show up every day
Yeah.
and still learn. Or in the case of us as adults, we still had to go to meetings and we still had to work. Conversations were not happening around. I know what you saw, for example, yesterday being the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd. Before that, conversations were not happening in places of work or in our schools. I know you saw the video. What are you feeling? We were normalizing our trauma and we weren't being able to talk about it. And I spoke to a lot of young people, because I deal with a lot of young people and mentor young people. They were normalizing their trauma, and if they were normalizing it, it was showing up in other ways. So you're 100% right. So Dr. Jackie, we're over, and please, panelists, please excuse me. I know we've gone long. Dr. Jackie, I'm going to ask you to close in answering that question, because I know you and I talk about this a lot together, about normalizing these types of conversations, and talk about why that is so important. And I know you and I have much more planned to
Yeah.
come talk about normalizing conversations like this.
Yeah, it's interesting when I hear the word normalize. I'm like, is it really normalize or routinalize? Do
Mm,
we get to make these conversations routine so that, it's like when you go to the doctor and they do a blood panel drawing. It's like they're gonna check for your T cells, they're gonna check for your, it's just a basic conversation and it's routine. You walk in expecting it. And so I think that for me is normalizing, is really making it a routine. Um, in terms of, as I wear many hats as a professor teaching social work. I can appreciate the poor law and welfare state history that we've experienced, right? From this is not new to us in the new world.
yes.
Before the 1600s, this was in Europe. This happened and it was brought. And so to appreciate that and to come from an understanding that mental health meant, before it wasn't mental health, it was mental illness. And I'm going to, because you're acting funny and different and strange, I am going to go ahead and cut part of your brain off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take it out because that's the only way that I find a solution. I'm bringing it to our immigrants that came in through Ellis Island. If you smile too much, I'm going to put an X on your back, literally with a chalk, and send you back home because there's something wrong with you, right? And so to be able to not go with the flow and to understand and educate yourself is important. Um, I also, as a professor, I try to teach from a point of a place of awareness. I have my students develop avatars based on what they learn. I had the honor of bringing an avatar about mental health to one of the classes because I was teaching psychology. And one of them, they were doing certain avatars in different settings, like, say, prison system, school system, and whatnot. And one of the parents did her avatar, and what she didn't realize was that her child was in the spectrum.
Wow.
And to be able to say, Professor, I think I'm in trouble,
Wow.
I was like, what? And to be able to walk that student to the guidance, because even in college setting, there's guidance. It doesn't
Yeah.
stop
Yeah.
with the little ones. It continues. To be able to walk that person through is something that I it is an honor to be able to say, you know what, babe, you don't have to stay there. This is an experience that you're going through. And it's important to be able to, like the question you asked before with the churches, to develop curriculums that are going to be impactful, right? Like with our ministry, we have the spiritual clinic is alignment with God. We have the entrepreneurship clinic that people sign up and say, I was not ready for this. Yeah, because I come from a place of God has touched my heart to come from a place of you get to heal first because you don't want to pour out the pain, the hurt, um, in an attempt to sell something,
Yes.
right? Because you're selling all of that. All of
It
that
comes
is
out in your business.
it does.
Yes.
Right. And so to close, listen, this is something that you get to speak to anyone, your children, elders, right? Check in with the elderly, check in with your parents, right? Check in to see how everyone's doing. And it doesn't discriminate. One day, like Alex said, I was fine. I wake up, I'm like, poof, right? The same way that she woke up with the realization, I'm going to make a plan, is the same way any one of us can wake up and say, I don't want to get out of bed. So I want to say, get the support you need. It's not like Zulai said, what are you, tan loca ahora? You're not crazy now. It means I get to seek the support without judgment.
Thank you. Once again, we've gone long.
And
this is an amazing
I'm so
topic.
Sorry. Can I just add one small thing? Just hearing Dr. Jackie talk about, the removal of brain parts and lobotomies and stuff like that. I think that one of the other, again, because everything in my life I put through the lens of being an educator and my kids. And when I say kids, I'm a high school level, right? So my kids are like 18, 19 sometimes.
Yes.
But, one of the things also that was happening for many years was that the minute that a child exhibited some kind of difference, right, it was like, well, let's see what medication we're going to put that kid on.
Right.
And I think that when you're talking about the normalization, the routinization of these conversations, it's about having them earlier so we can talk about what's going on and not put that kid on medication.
Yes.
And maybe just get to the root of what we need to talk about. Because for so many years, again, that was another issue we were saying, right? We're going too far in another direction when it came to young people. And so again, yes, routinizing, normalizing, customizing these kinds of conversations. There is so much that we don't even realize can be changed and improved in all of human society just with that. Sorry, I just needed to say that.
That's okay. Thank you. And I want to thank each of you for being here, for bringing your expertise, for being vulnerable in this conversation. Again, my apologies for us going so long. To each of you as well as my audience, I thank you all. Even though it is Mental Health Awareness Month, mental health awareness is not just for a month. It is every single day. It's in all of our DNA and all of us. If we're breathing, we've seen some things and we've been through some things. We must continue to have these conversations. So I thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday evening. Wellness Wednesday by Black for Life. I thank you all. Have a wonderful evening and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Great night. Thank you.
Having